thank you for coming. Thank you for joining me for this Monday. My name is Dr. Brinen. I'm an assistant professor at the Drexel's College of Medicine in the Department of Psychiatry. Today's topic, which we're calling the love connection, dating and psychosis, was one of the topics that people emailed Kat Conroy and said, this is something we wanted to talk about. How do we talk to our individuals about talking to potential dating folks about their mental illness and those things. And then another topic was, how do you what about genetics? Am I going to pass this on to my child if I have children? And I really felt like these go together. I think it really talks to an important topic. And it's really one of the most heartbreaking things that I talk with the individuals I serve about. And when we get into it, I think you'll see why it's so heartbreaking to me. But it's also one of the most fun things to talk about, because at the end of the day, we're talking about going out on dates and, how much normal can you be? One, I think there's nothing more normal in life than dating. And two, the only thing that's more normal in life than dating is having bad dates. So and having crummy significant others and fighting and then making up and stuff like that. And so if what we're trying to do is help individuals drive home this idea of normalcy and really drive home, those things, I think this is a fantastic topic to bring about that with. So all that to be said, let's get into the topic for today. I thought it was fun calling it the love connection. So CTR and dating, the purpose of today is going to be to really think through the psychology of dating, really, what are the things that are going to get in the way for the individuals that we serve? And then also starting to develop some of the strategies to enhance pursuit of relationships, really to go after this piece. This isn't about determining safety. This isn't about, role play. This isn't about some of those other things that come into play when people start thinking about dating. This is really, again, going after what is the big picture thing that we're tackling, and how do we go through helping an individual move forward and really live the life that they want. Okay. So that gets us into why dating and love, right? And some people go, well, aren't there more important things? Is that what they should be focusing in on? And to surprise everybody on a Monday, you are on the correct webinar. But yeah, Freud said it perfectly. Love and work are the cornerstones of our humanness, right? And so if CTR is about living the life that you want, finding those things that you want to be doing, the things you want to be getting, love might be a part of it. It might not be. There are people who dating is not their thing. I think you need to kick that tire a little bit, though, and really just check it out. But, we're talking about people pursuing the life of their choosing. So dating is probably going to be could be a big part of it. And being in a relationship, it could be a big part of it. So some of the things that come up for the individuals that we talk about, and I think this is the part that really breaks my heart, is, when they start saying, how do I talk about my psychosis with people? Aren't they going to reject me? Will my children have it? These things that can come up for individuals. It reminds me, if anybody ever saw the Disney movie, Beauty and the Beast. And there's this wonderful line, it's a heartbreaking line at the beginning of the introduction to the movie, where they sort of, put all the background of the movie into place. And the last line of it is, goes, and who could ever love a beast? And I think for some of the people that we serve, this is the way that they see themselves. They see themselves as defective and broken and these monsters that nobody could ever love. And to me, it's heartbreaking because, not in a way that has poor boundaries, but I really care for these people. These people are wonderful, and they're smart, and they're funny, and they're sassy. They're obnoxious in a great way, and there's this quality that they're the glasses through which they see things are that they're unlovable and that there's something inherently wrong with them. And some of the people I serve, I sometimes wonder if they're the most right people out there. And so to me, that's why this is so heartbreaking. And particularly, like, listen, I'm not as young anymore as some of the people in the first episode teams. You see these like young 16, 17, 18-year olds on some of those first episode teams, and they think that nobody will ever be able to love them. So that's why I think this is such a great topic. And it's also a nice thing. It definitely fits into our model of stuff people want to work on. Right. There's lots of topics that we can introduce that individuals go, nope, nope, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in that at all. But, dating, people want to work on. People want to date. If you put together a dating group, everybody will show up to that one. Nobody's going to show up to your social skills group, but everybody's going to show up to your dating group. So here's just some of the things to go into there. Um, So the love connection, right? I think for us to define what we're talking about, this issue is not going to be about a skills issue. And I think the first thing we can jump into really quickly is this idea of we need to define what the skills are, figure out what the skills are for the people. And I think really it's important for us to recognize this is not going to be about a skills issue. I think we need to focus in on the cognitive issue that we've got here. I think we can really get into a cognitive behavioral issue here. I think that there are thoughts that individuals have that come up that cause distress, that cause them to engage in behaviors to manage that distress and manage what they see as potential dangers as a result of it. At the core of it, I think individuals catastrophize the situation. And so they get this real specific tunnel vision about what it's going to be. And they sort of forget if they've dated before, or they don't really take into consideration all of the pieces around dating. And so our job will be to help them sort of play out the process of dating and start to reevaluate some of those beliefs that they might have about themselves. Also, I think many of the individuals that we serve, in an attempt to be honest, abandon many of the basic social skills that we have when we get into dating. Right. So they're so interested in being honest. So those are going to be some of the things that we'll talk about as we go through. So how do I talk about it, right? How do we talk about it with the individual? When the individual asks us, how do I talk about it? How do I bring up the fact that I have a mental illness, or that I've been in the hospital? I think at that point, what we want to do when the people we serve ask that question is we want to identify what's actually going through their mind. Right? They're going to ask, how do I talk about it? And if we answer with things like role plays or talking about skills and things like that, we could be missing the information that this person's really struggling with. So we really want to move into so when you think of, we want to move into that chain analysis spot. When the individual says, what can I do? How do I talk about it? The answer really should be, so when you think about dating, what's going through your mind, right? So right now you're talking to me and you're asking me this question. What's going through your mind? So you have an image of dating. What are you telling yourself? Right? Or even if we want to start the other way, what's that like for you when you're thinking about dating? Okay, so when you're thinking about dating and you're feeling anxious in your body, right? What's going through your mind, right? What do you see happening? What are you worried is going to happen? Whatever the answer is to that, that's where the intervention comes in. At the end of the day, we could role play through to decatastrophize, but we really want to understand what their feared outcome is and what they're concerned about. What their concern is going to happen. Also, one of the things just to highlight for people, today I'm going to try to make sure I really, keep a good 15 minutes at the end for us to all ask questions and talk about, because I know many of you have had these experiences in this as well. So both ideas that you've used, but also if there are questions on how to do this. The first thing is that I find that the majority of the individuals that I serve have experienced, and I can think of maybe 5 to 7 individuals off the top of my head, without falling out of bed, uh, who have this sort of confessional belief, right? This sort of cult of confession that they need to let everybody know up front. Their first concern is, if I start dating somebody, um, I don't want them to feel like I'm deceiving them. I don't want them to feel like I wasn't honest with them. And so they really have this sense of, on the first date, before the first date, I need to let this person know that I have a mental illness, and that could be a struggle for the rest of my life. Right. And that might be something that we're going to be dealing with if for the rest of our life. I need to really be upfront, because if I'm not upfront with this person, they're going to think I'm a liar. So the problem with this concern, with this approach, firstly, it's really sweet that the person wants to be so honest. I mean, I think we all would wish that in relationships, people were that honest. And it's coming from a really good place. So they're not wrong or thought disordered or anything like that when they have that desire. But the real problem is that that's just not an accurate belief. It's just not. First of all, it's definitely not helpful, right? It doesn't help you feel less stressed. It doesn't help you feel motivated to go into dating. Which, by the way, I'm going to bring this up a little bit later. But let's all remember that I think being in a relationship can be wonderful. I've been in a relationship for like 22 years, and I'm still loving it. It's really my favorite thing in the world. That being said, I don't know that dating is particularly fun. And so I think that that's, the process of getting into a relationship is stressful. So if I tell myself I have to be upfront and I have to confess this mental illness, that's just going to make the bar that much higher to jump into this process, which can be somewhat aversive at times. The other part of it is that it's actually not that accurate of a belief. Not many of us, it's not true that we tell everybody all of our deepest secrets and all of the, little weirdnesses about us when we first start dating. Nobody does, really, if you think about it. Nobody on this call, when you started dating the last person you started dating, told them about, if you had credit card debt. Nobody told them if you had toe fungus. Nobody told them. One of the individuals who really was struggling and arguing with me that it's really important that he has to confess this to them. I asked him, if you had raging hemorrhoids, would you tell the person you're dating with that you had like really raging hemorrhoids right before you went on the date? And this individual got really shocked and started laughing. And I said, so why on a first date when you're barely even getting coffee, do you have to explain that at one point you heard voices in your life? What happens is this idea of confession really neglects the actual way in which relationships truly unfold. And the way that relationships unfold, which many of us know, is that it unfolds over time. And so what happens is that the individuals we serve, because they're so nervous about what's going to happen in the future, they miss the fact that this relationship is ultimately going to unfold in time with the person. So the intervention, the strategy is to help them play it out in session. When they say, I have to confess this, they need to know up front. Have them think through the timeline of what it is to date somebody, right? So what happens first in dating, right? And I've even drawn this out on a dry erase board. So what's the first thing that happens when you date? And invariably, the individual will say, well, you go on a first date. And that's actually not true. The first thing in dating is you make a profile. I mean, many people nowadays, they make a profile on an online app. And so before you even get out there, you make a profile. And then you need to pick a picture. And then you need to log into the online dating, right? Or if you're not doing online dating, you find some place that you want to go to meet somebody, you join that group and you go to a bunch of the, a bunch of the meetups. Those are some of the first things that happen. If you're doing online dating, and I'm also very open with the individuals that I serve, that when I got married, before I got married, online dating was not a real thing, right? And so it's not that I'm judging it; it's that I have lots of areas that I have a lot of expertise in, and that this is an area that we're going to have to sort of tackle together because, you know, nowadays, if I tried to if I tried to check out these apps to learn them so I could be of better use, I'd get into a lot of trouble if I downloaded, Bumble and started playing around with it on my phone. I'm sure my wife would be like really angry and want to know why I have Bumble on my phone. So I've never done that. So the closest I ever got to Tinder was when my individuals have had it and we kind of looked through the app together in session. So those are some of the very first things that happen. The next thing that happens is you go on a bunch of crappy first dates. It's sort of the rite of passage of normalcy, is that you go on a bunch of crappy first dates. So what are the type? And so then in the timeline intervention, we go, what are the things that you talk about with somebody on a first date? You talk about, do you like, Marvel or DC? Are you a dog or are you a cat person? Do you go to church? Do you not go to church? Where did you grow up? Did you like high school? Did you not like high school? So it's really talking about relationships in this sense of ramping up. I can't say how many dates when I was dating that I started out on where on the first date we were talking about really deep issues of growing up or whatever. Does it happen? Sure. Does it happen all the time? No. So listen, the last person I did this intervention with, we really sort of noticed that it was probably from dates 1 through 4, you're sort of talking in topics around, are you a cat or a dog person? Some of those sort of basic fun, you're doing stuff together, right? You may or may not have kissed, you may have not have been affectionate in that time. Then we get into this sort of middle ground where we start talking about a couple more serious things, right? So we might be talking about, what it was like growing up, what you do for a job, those types of things, right? Topics that are a little bit deeper. At that point, we really start talking about that at the same time as whether the individual has mental illness or not is coming up, remembering that the individual, the dator is also going to be talking about things, right? So maybe this person's perfect and has never had trouble in their life. What we know is 60% of people, 6 out of 10 people, have experienced mental illness in their life. And so for many people, they're experiencing this as well. Maybe the individual failed out of, the person that they're dating has failed out of school. Maybe that person wasn't successful at a job. Maybe they've been fired. Maybe they were in a hospital as well. Maybe they had a loved one who had mental illness. And so recognizing that while the individual we're serving is starting to disclose information, so too is the person they're dating. And so nobody's perfect. And so helping them recognize that it's going to be an equal sharing. And also, by the way, the individual we're serving might find that they're not down for dating this person either. There may be things that the person they're dating is bringing to the table that they're not comfortable with. Maybe they use drugs that just seem like they could get away from them. Maybe they drink too much. And so maybe they're just really, really religious or not religious enough. And so the idea that relationships are a negotiation, it's really getting to know each other to see if it is a partnership. So the important thing to remember is to start the process, because this idea that I need to confess it as soon as I start, one, oftentimes ends a relationship before it begins. Two, will oftentimes stop the individuals from starting relationships to begin with. Um, the problem of this idea of confession also comes in with um, if the individual shows up to the first date and it starts talking about the fact that, they'd been hospitalized in the past, sometimes they self-injure, they hear voices saying things, that's a lot of stuff to unload on another individual in their first meeting. And so it's not something to be ashamed of, but it actually just, it comes across as though the individual we're serving doesn't really have an understanding of what's socially appropriate. And so again, remembering that that dates 1 through 4 or 5 are going to be the slow ramping up of the relationship process, helping the individual notice that timeline and play it out, and recognizing that many of these relationships are going to end on dates 1 and 2, right? There are a lot of first dates that don't have second dates. And again, is that because the individual has mental illness? No, it's because they're normal. That's what happens to a lot of people. The next question is this idea of that the individual will get rejected. Once they find out, they're just going to reject me, right? What happens if I get in and I've been dating this person for 2 months and then we have this conversation about the fact that I'm a voice hearer, right? Or that I've been hospitalized before? Won't they reject me? And so at that point, it's really important to help the individual focus in on the fact that really what's happening is that they're what we would call selectively abstracting. They're really focused in on the fact that all I am is this broken person. All I am is this schizophrenic. And there's nothing that can be done to help me, that nobody would ever want me, right? I'm broken, right? I'm only a problem that this person's going to have to deal with. And so they're really negating the beauty that these individuals bring to the table, the gentleness, the compassion, the care that they bring to it. So one of the interventions that we can really use is this idea of a pie chart. And this is sort of a classic cognitive behavioral intervention, but it's really powerful to see side by side. So what the pie chart does is, really what the individual is saying is, all I am is this one problem, right? I'm 100% just a schizophrenic. And so what we're going to do is take this idea, these beliefs that are sort of stigma-based, and we're going to place them, compare them to other qualities that the individual has. And the idea is that that the individual we serve knows is that they're more than just their problems. They're more than just psychosis, that there are lots of things that they are. And psychosis, a person with psychosis may be one of the aspects of it. So here's just a video that I created just demonstrating it, so that way I don't have to role play it.
So when I ask you what you have to offer her, for the most part, it sounds like you think I'm just a schizophrenic. Is that right? Mm-hmm. So tell me, I've known you for a little while. What are you? Well, I'm a brother. I'm a son. What about the people at the program? Well, I guess I'm a friend. Well, what about... What do you usually like to do on the weekends? Well, I really like barbecue. And I like going hiking. Okay. So, what percentage are you a brother, if you had to give it a percentage? And it all adds up to 100%. 20? What about a son? Well, 30. That's important. What about being a good friend? 20. What about barbecue? How much do you like barbecue? I guess it's 10%, less than being a brother and less than being a friend. What about being a hiker and liking the outdoors? Well, I really like hiking. So let me try this out. And yet, when you said what you'd have to offer somebody you were going to date, this is what you came up with. Which is the more accurate pie chart?
So, uh, so it well, that was more fun than me role playing it out. So the idea being, and it's such a simple intervention. It's also one that Dr. Beck absolutely adores. He talks about it all the time. But it's just this way in which we're getting out of arguing. We're just having the person explain what they are, and then having them list on one side, list on the other side, and then you just see the pie chart side by side. And when you do, it really starts to rock that idea of I'm just this one thing. And it's easier than I know a lot of times we can do this great work around stigma. You know, we're more than mental illness. You're not a schizophrenic. And what I find a lot of times is individuals go, yeah, I know. So I'm a schizophrenic. Like, so they know it here, but when you see it in front of you, when you see that pie chart, and I've done the pie chart so many times, it's really sort of fun to see how it kind of blows their mind away. One time I did the pie chart with a guy, and he was just really convinced that, you know, he's broken. And we did the pie chart and we started writing up there, you know, and he's real, this person was really into sports and was really religious, loved his family, you know, really loved volunteering, all of these great things. And really wanted to date, wanted to be a wonderful boyfriend. And so we rated all of this stuff, including being a voice hearer, right, or a person with a mental illness. And so we started rating all the information on there, and then if you notice, the mental illness piece is always at the bottom, so they have to give up all their numbers first. And sometimes we'll even start erasing them and then adjusting the numbers. Like, you can spend all your time on that part. And I remember making fun of him, just really busting his chops over, um, I won't let your girlfriend know that at first you rated being a voice hearer over her, because I don't want you to get in trouble. And so for probably 4 sessions, I would sort of just like zing those in, and we just would laugh together about this idea of, you know, if you want, the number one thing I can tell you about dating is that your girlfriend, and your wife or your boyfriend and husband are always more important than your voices. They always have to be number one, or else you are going to be in trouble. You know, sort of like happy wife, happy life. And so it just became this wonderful, just sort of zinging on this normalcy piece around it. So it does get us to so helping individuals identify their concerns and their fears, and then developing interventions to undermine the fear, and really looking toward more helpful ways of approaching this dating thing, is really the strategy that we're going to pursue. Uh, it does get us to the point of, it's fine at some point to say, well, how do you explain your mental illness to somebody that you're dating? I think the approach I oftentimes say is, you need to not explain the gestalt of your whole life in having mental illness. So you don't need to give them um, a detailed history like the way you would do if you were going to see a new psychiatrist. Just explain the current state of affairs. Explain what functionally is getting in the way for you right now. And so if at times when you're alone and you're stressed, you hear some whispering, it's fine to just explain this functional piece. You know, when I get stressed, I find that I get really worried around other people. That's describing paranoia and suspiciousness. It's an accurate statement too. Or I find that like when I stay alone for too long and I start getting really worried, that I just start to kind of feel like things are sort of talking to me and bugging me, right? And I just hear things almost like tinnitus, that the hearing thing that people get. I sort of get that, and it can bother me. Also helping them to normalize the experience, right? Give them some of the data that 1% of the population might have a mental illness that they call schizophrenia, which is sort of a really stupid name. It doesn't really predict much. It doesn't mean much. But what we know is about 8 to 10% of the population hear voices on a regular basis, have no diagnosis whatsoever. They just sort of walk around it. And we all can hear voices at some point or another. Helping the individual to explain that and say, so I had this and it happens more often sometimes. And listen, I've got these things that I do so that way they don't have to bug me. I know that when I jump in and I end up in a relationship, or, I end up going and doing something fun, that it helps me feel better. The important thing in explaining the mental illness to a potential significant other is to remember, one, that having the individual recall that they are different than the first session or the first time they entered treatment. And so explain how they are now. The other part is to remember that they have a team around them. You're not alone. So as you're getting into these things, as you're getting into dating and things like that, you have a team around you. The other thing, and this is just this is a clinical piece that I've observed, is how many individuals that I've served who actually are still sometimes in the throes of really severe psychosis, who are dating people who really stick by them. So it's actually a testament to how much we are able to come together and love. That there have been a number of times where I've consulted with significant others as they want to support their loved one and understand that they're going through difficult times. And these are sometimes significant others with really wonderful jobs, right? Really capable. These are just really kind of high-powered people who want to stick by this loved one because they just really care for this person. So the behavior we really want our individuals to avoid and we want to pay attention to is not to be shocked, but this is an outcrop of negative symptoms. It's this sense of sort of putting it off, this idea of waiting, remembering that like dating is stressful and anxiety provoking. And so if you haven't dated in a while, like spend some time to remember or pull up some old pictures of what it was like when you were dating, and remember what it was like to be dating. If you are dating, just pay attention to like the last time you went on a first date and how anxious it might have made you. And exciting too. I mean, like there's lots of great parts, I'm sure, about dating. But there's also a lot of anxiety, and our minds gravitate toward the anxiety of a situation versus the excitement of it sometimes. So that being said, it's going to be really easy to avoid something that naturally is going to make us feel anxious. So many individuals are likely to just say, well, I'm going to wait, right? A lot of times I hear, well, I just want to make sure that I'm better, right? So once I get 100% better, then I'm going to start dating, right? Once everything's fixed, right? So I don't want to put the cart before the horse, right? I don't want to sort of jump the gun, right? So once I'm better, then I'll start dating. And then, the other one is I'm just waiting to get a little bit further in my treatment. Once I get a little bit further in my recovery, then I'll start dating. And one of the things to help people recognize is that there's no good time to date. There's no good time to have children, to go back to school, to date. If we wait for the perfect time to do something, we will never do anything. And so recognizing that and going, and even asking about maybe their parents, a lot of times their parents probably were in college or were in, might have been in a trade school or a professional school. Their parents may have been really poor when, and were starting out when they were dating or having kids, and having them even go ask people, "Oh, when you first started dating, mom and dad, what was going on?" One of them may have been in college. The other one might have been waiting tables. Were they ready? Was life really perfect? Frequently, I find that if we all wait for life to be perfect, then we'd never end up dating. The other part of it is helpful to define what's better. And so a lot of times they can set this ambiguous, this sort of vague finish line of, when I'm a little bit better. And so let's define objectively. Okay, so what are you talking about? Maybe it's when I have a job and I haven't gone to the hospital in 2 months. Okay, that makes sense. I get it. That's better, and we could go with that. But better is a finish line that will continue to sort of creep forward for the individuals that we serve. So making sure we don't let that happen so much, and guide them to identify what is better. So the last part of it, and I think this is so crucial, is let's make sure that as we're helping individuals through this, we don't lose this opportunity for guiding, right? Let's make sure that we help them restructure their beliefs. So if they have a bad date, and the person's really weird and it's uncomfortable, and they get super annoyed, one of the things that's a great, it's my favorite cognitive restructuring move is to help them notice that, one, they survived, but two, it probably means that they're super normal. So, and I know I keep saying this, I might get like sort of a nasty gram after the workshop, after the webinar, but it is true. Like, bad dates are the most normal thing that we can do, right? And then it gives you something to complain about. You can call up your friends and complain about the fact that you had this really crummy date. Like, how perfect is that? It's like a win-win. The other part is, if we work on some of this sort of selective abstraction, jumping to conclusions, all or nothing thinking, these are all things that we can practice changing the way that we're thinking, and then applying that to other parts of our lives, right? Also, this behavior of sort of waiting or ruminating, if we help our individuals sort of overcome that, we can apply those behavior changes throughout the rest of their life. And then the last part of it is really this idea of congratulations, you're really normal. Dating, being in a relationship can be amazing. Dating can stink. So congratulations, you're in it with everybody else. And even have them start looking like text old friends. One of the individuals I've been serving recently ended up asking a friend who was married about sort of embarrassing things this person had done in their life. The friend said, "No, my spouse doesn't know about half the crap I did." Right? And this person's been married for years. And so it's a great way of giving something new to go out and sort of survey people around. It's a great way of sort of learning this idea of you're really, really normal. So that brings us to the last part that we're going to talk about, and this is sort of the other side of it. I think a lot of individuals that we serve are really worried about what are they going to pass on to their children. Don't I have genetics that are going to make my child ill? Well, I give this to my child. I don't think that there's any real easy answers to it. I think taking a step back and saying, let's look at the reality of genetics and what we know and what we don't know. There's a wonderful book by a guy named Richard Bentall, who's a professor in England, called Doctoring the Mind. I'll put a link to it on the webpage. And he really sort of talks about like what we know about genetics. And the beautiful thing about Richard is he is a real academic all the way through. So he doesn't overblow what he's saying. He just reports exactly what the what the research says. So there's really no easy answer to this. What we know is that if there is a genetic component to it, what the genetics suggest is that there's an increased chance of your kid having something, which I know doesn't seem really exciting and you know um, like specific great information, but it's actually where our salvation lies. Is yeah, if there's a genetic component there, your kid might have something different about him or her. But it could be true if you had no mental illness that your child might have something. And so at the end of the day, we can really focus in on on what we can control, which is the environmental factor, right? What can we do as parents to make things better, right? And that's ultimately the role of being a parent, is to try and do these things for our children. If we try to control this genetic piece, it's just going to be maddening, and there's really, like I said, no good way to control it. And the other part of it is, I think it's an opportunity to have a conversation about what this experience that your individual has gone through will how it will shape the way your individual will be a parent, right? What, after this situation that you've been through, what will you teach your child? Think about the lessons that the child will learn about resilience. Think about the lessons the child will learn about love, the skills that the individuals we have that we serve have, that they can teach their child. There's so much that this experience brings to parenting and prepares you in a way of parenting. The child, our individual's child will have a model of, Confucius says, our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. And so the individual, when the individual becomes a parent, will be able to model that, talk about the experience, and really, as their child starts to fall or falter, will have so much more compassion toward the difficulties of being a human. And if their child does become ill, who better to parent a child who might become a voice hearer than somebody who's been through it, him or herself. So so then the question is less about, will I be able to parent this person? Will I be able to be successful? But more so, how are you going to prepare yourself to be this great parent that you're ready to be? And one of the things I've been really fortunate to see in my work is some of these individuals, whether they've applied it to other loved ones in their family, when they've become parents, really seeing how the work that we've done together, carries over in helping family members out and things like that. And it's actually just a really beautiful thing, and another way of the individual learning about their own capability. So I'm going to open us up for questions in just a little bit. On Friday, we're going to tackle negative symptoms. We're going to do a nice deep dive into it, really thinking them through, because I think they're sort of the sleeper symptom that we don't always get a chance to focus in on, but we're going to really focus in on them on Friday. And then we're going to get the rest of the schedule out to everybody. So again, my name is Dr. Aaron Brinen. I'm an assistant professor at the Department of Psychiatry at Drexel's College of Medicine. And with that, let's do some questions, gang. Anybody have any questions? You can unmute or type, but remember, I'm a slow reader. Have people run into difficulties when when they've worked with individuals on on this topic, right? When they've tried dating and things like that?
Hey, Brent. Aaron, it's Valerie from Peace. Yes, and our young people are always interested in dating, and it's like a something we're struggling to work with. And I'm glad you said about online dating because some of them are into that, and I couldn't help them at all. But being honest and telling them that I don't have that experience might be an icebreaker, and also telling them like dating sucks. Like it just for everybody is going to be helpful.
Yeah. Because I think that's really helpful. And one of the things I said is let's bring it in. This is a great thing. There's a wonderful in one of the studies. Actually, this is the study I started working with Kat on at the VA, where we used a group version of CTR to try and improve outcomes for supported employment. One of the interventions of supported employment, which is a wonderful intervention, is called asking the experts. And so essentially what happens is the provider and the individual go to an expert on a job and they interview that expert. And so it's a wonderful thing that we can do is we can uh, go with the individual, go online. So the first person I worked with about Tinder, we went online. I said, I don't know anything about it. And we had a good laugh over it, and I think he appreciated that I wasn't coming off as some like, this is an individual who could get really suspicious. And he appreciated that I wasn't trying to pretend that I was an expert on it. So I said, well, listen, the one thing the internet has plenty of is articles on how to do stuff. So he and I looked up articles online and we read it. I think we watched like a YouTube on the best way to do Tinder. And what they said was, every morning, just do your 40 swipes. You get like 40 free swipes a day. Get them, be done. Once you're done, like waiting around isn't going to help. And then tomorrow you can do 40 swipes again. And that was really interesting. And so also there was a really great point, which was saying just because somebody doesn't swipe you back doesn't mean they don't like you. And what this article did, by the way, this article did the complete CBT intervention. It walked the person through of going, listen, if a person swipes you, whichever way you swipe, and then goes in, starts dating, gets married to this person that they go on this first date with, they're never going to go back to Tinder. They're never going to go and say, oh, by the way, I started dating somebody. And so you could get swiped, and you could reply back to the person. And then that person just got into a relationship. But you're never going to know that. So don't understand that there's lots of factors that play into all of the Tinder and dating things. And so the two of us went, whoa. And actually, this guy, I said, where else could we apply that, right? That seemed like a really interesting idea. And then we started applying it to other points in his life as well. And then, yeah, Valerie, I think you're totally right, is just acknowledging it. I think a lot of the ways that the individuals that we serve imagine dating is like the movie 50 First Dates, right? Or, the TV shows that they watch where, a little bit of a bump, one bad, had one weird night and then everybody's happy and ends up together. That's not the way dating works, right? There's like annoying dates and there's crummy dates and things like that. So if we sort of idealize the way that we see in the movies, the way relationships happen, that's not the way relationships happen. And not to get too personal on a Monday morning, but that's not the way sex happens. So there's a lot of good conversations around there, the other thing, and one person posted, was this idea of normalizing the dating experience can be really helpful. I know a lot of agencies, I've been with agencies and I've been at hospitals where the idea of talking about dating was like really shut down hardcore. And like I said, I think it's a conversation people want to have. And I think it's a conversation that people will show up to. And so whether it's sort of like upping your dating game and things like that, I think a lot of people will will show up for something like that. There's a huge appetite out there for that. You know, cool. I'm glad it was helpful. Other questions or thoughts people have?
Dr. Brinen, a quick question about dating in groups. What is your policy or thoughts on that?
I usually veer people away from that. I sometimes go with just sort of a pragmatic piece about it. Although, I mean, listen, I think some people do. I think going, just thinking about this, I don't know, it's a horrible way to say it, but thinking about fishing in a bigger pond. And so I think that there are people who are going to be in groups and ultimately find a wonderful connection, and they're really great, and it's the sweetest story ever. I think a lot of times it's sort of, I don't have a lot of stuff in my world, you know, and so this is a person who's in front of me and always shows up for our meetings. So that's the person in front of me. So that's not a great way of doing it. You know, that would be sort of my thought. Also, I think there's a million other areas of that's a agency question. I think that's also personal formulation piece of it. Is saying, listen, here, you know, asking people also to be open with you about it, so you guys can sort of come up with some ground rules around it. I think that those are just some ways of just thinking through the possible implications. The biggest one being, it's great if you date and everything goes great. It's really bad if one of the partners in the relationship doesn't like what somebody else in the group says to the other partner. That's always no good. The other part that can get into there is that they that if they break up, is that how do you deal with that piece of it? So those are just some of the things. If it's a limited time group, maybe saying, can we just put it off till after the group's over? So just some kind of off the top of my head ideas. Other questions? I saw Brittany's face pop up for a second.
Oh, I was just going to chime in and say that when I was starting CTR, I was struggling with online dating myself, and Rex and Jessica were my trainers, and they were like, well, yeah, you just share that with them. And I was like, oh, yeah, I can do that because I totally feel you.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome. And listen, I think there's always I always call it like a poverty of content. Like, I think there's a way to share our own experiences without going, without adding unnecessary detail to it. So it could be like, listen, you know, whenever I've dated in the past, you know, and I've done online dating, you know, here were the problems that came up. Could also go like, listen, everybody that I know runs into these problems, and probably if there were difficulties that you ran into, my guess is you and every other person, every other friend that you've had may have had some of those problems. So saying, listen, everybody I know who does the online dating, here's some of the initial problems, and here's some of the things that solve it, and here's some of the wonderful outcomes of it. And that's still an accurate statement. And so there's a wonderful way that we can balance that genuineness with it. I mean, I literally, the phrase I say to every individual that I serve is essentially, when I first started dating, you know, if you know, and really, I'm not kidding when I say this, I think it's like 22 years now. So if you think about, like 1999, 2000, like if you dated somebody online back then, I mean, those worked out great, but most people, it was really bad. Nowadays, sometimes if you meet somebody in person, it turns out really bad. And online dating is where you do it. So it's just a different thing. So I share that with the individuals I serve, and we laugh, and then we figure it out together. So, well, everybody have a great week. I hope to see you guys Friday for Negative Symptoms. Until then, be well and wash your hands, and I will see you guys then. Thanks so much for joining me on this wonderful Monday. Take care wherever you are in the world. Bye.